I'm one of the core scientists in the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. I work for the Natural Heritage Program, and we're the lead agency that deals with inventory, monitoring, and research on rare, threatened, and endangered species, animals, and plants, which may make you think, well, what are you doing here? Well, in baseball terms, is a pinch hitter or a designated hitter? I think I'm the pinch hitter for my program today. Like rare, threatened, endangered plants already have enough problems existing with the urban pressures, suburban pressures, invasive species, and things that are just come out of left field, like emerald ash borer, provide even more stressors, and it's very difficult to predict what their impacts might be. So we'll take a look at one of Jason Harrison's great pictures from the Pocomoke. So we have all of these ash trees scattered around, and with bald cypress on the lower Pocomoke. It's near Hickory Point. So the basic things you need to know, or this little guy right there, is going to change everything for a lot of species, not just the rare, threatened, endangered ones. We have about 6 species of ash in Maryland. So my things aren't working too well. They range from these fairly small multi-stem sub-canopy trees to very large canopy trees, up to 60 to 80 feet tall. And things that I don't know that I'll talk about at lunch, I like to ask some folks how susceptible are other species in the family that includes ash. And things like privets, if there's one native species, lilacs, of course. If you have lilacs, you're already used to dealing with borers. Even things like forsythia, but I'm going to mention one native wetland shrub in particular. So this presentation will provide a brief overview of 5 of those species, and because we get a little myopic, like where's ash in my neighborhood or in my subdivision, I'm going to start off with North America, and then I'm going to collapse down to to focus on just green ash and Marcy Oak Creek, and I'll conclude with some general concerns. And the last slide was just things that keep me awake at night. So in alphabetical order, we'll start with Fraxinus americana, or white ash. So we have these nice little maps from John Cortez in the Biota of North America program. Now, a note on maps. Maps are static things. And if you've ever used a road map, when things change, your map doesn't work. Well, their distribution maps, particularly for plants, are always something in progress. So what these maps show this is a county map of the United States, and if a state is colored in that dark green, it means the species is present. And if you have a little, lime green, colored outline, that means the species is known for that county. So it's fairly coarse, but you can see that you have a very wide-ranging species. It covers almost the entire eastern half of the United States, except for parts of southern Florida. It's not quite as common on the eastern shore, although when you get up in like Cecil and Harford County, this is something you'll find more in the uplands and the rich rolling hills of the Ridge and Valley and on into Garrett County. And that's when I first started seeing things like this. So seeing these little white spots on the top of the ash trees, and then later on there became these very visible spots of emerald ash borer. The end result is we have between Green Ridge, of course, so that's a little east of Cumberland and west of Frederick. Probably close to 99% mortality. But, and this is something else we can talk about later. Carolina ash, and here's one of my references to maps are always static. Carolina ash just creeps up the Delmarva Peninsula and gets into County. And so here's a nice photograph by Jim Brighton of it near Porter's Crossing on the Pocomoke. This is rare. First mention I made of something rare as a rare and endangered species biologist today. It's restricted. The black ash is, I'll tell you what these little yellow dots now for the county. If you have a county that has a yellow mark, it means it's present in that county and the state considers it rare. So black ash in Maryland is something that's much more isolated. You have these isolated wetlands, and so it tends to be patchy. Whereas ridgelines with white ash, or you have these large expanses where the tree can grow. Black ash is much more patchy. So here's an example of one habitat. So this is in Frederick County, and we're talking about populations on a range of acres, not hundreds of acres. And so it's localized. And it's generally associated with some kind of increase in calcium in the soil. And generally that would mean limestone. So on the eastern shore where we have tiny little pockets, it can also mean shell marl, oyster shells, and shell beds. Botanist profundus, pumpkin ash. It's also infrequent in Maryland, although it's almost in every tributary to the Chesapeake Bay on both the western and the eastern shores. And you can see that it comes up the east coast and then up the Mississippi embayment all the way up into the Great Lakes region. If you fish or if you're boating on tidal creeks, you've seen pumpkin ash. It just looks like all other ashes do. But one of the things that happens is that where most ash trees turn a sort of a buttery yellow in the fall, this is from Chickamuxon Creek in Charles County. It's collected in October. You get this very dark, russet, almost orange color. And so of the species, it grows in the soupiest soils. So here's like Alnus marittima. Of course, this is the tidal nufar. And here's a Fraxinus profunda right there. And so its populations tend to be linear. So if you imagine the shoreline of the Chesapeake Bay and all the tributaries, that's what the population looks like. It's just these long waves following these tidal creeks. And the last one, the one that we're going to focus on, is green ash. So we're looking at a tree species that covers almost half of the nation. Places these things, it means it was introduced into the state probably as street trees. It was a favorite tree for street trees for many years because its roots go down. It doesn't tend to buckle sidewalks and roadways quite so much. It's extremely common in most states. You notice there aren't any little yellow marked counties. One of the things where I'll have to make a plug for these guys, one of the things we're trying to do on the Maryland Plant Atlas is give you an idea of distributions that aren't quite so static using these little heat maps, but this is pretty much the distribution of green ash on the eastern shore. Just the darker colors mean there are just more hits. So we can use things like citizen science as well as mounted specimens that are in herbaria. So I'm going to drop down to looking at green ash on Marcy Oak Creek. Marcy Hope is a major tributary to the Nanticoke River, drains about 220 square miles. It's 37 miles long. It starts right around Harrington, Delaware, and then dumps into Nanticoke about Sharptown. Landscape-wise, about 36% of that land is forested wetland. 61% of it is agricultural land. You'll get a better look at that in the next slide. And there's less than 2% urban. So you have a very rural landscape. And you have, if you wonder where ash is in Maryland, there's 37 miles of it along the Marcy Oak Creek. We'll focus on. So here's a better look at the at a sort of a satellite image from the University of Delaware. And note right over the hope, see this big green blob right there? Very dense. So that is mostly Idlewild Wildlife Management Area. And Marcy Oak Creek, Upper Marcy Oak Creek is running right in a line, right down through here, through Fredericksburg, and then of course it goes down into near Vienna, Sharpsburg. So it's about a little less than 4,000 acres of bottomland, swamp, and adjacent uplands. But here's the problem. About 1 in 5 trees in that 4,000 acres is a green ash. So we're not talking about something insubstantial. And in these little back swamps, you see the ash trees here show a common adaptation, which is called buttressing. So these are pure stands. So all of these trees are green ash. And since I mentioned back swamp, I put a little picture to show you what that is. Over time, for almost all of these particularly in upper tidal reaches, these heaviest sediments form right on the channel edges, and which means behind it, particularly in the spring, you get long periods where you have these big pools, and they'll sit for most of the summer, which creates much more stressful conditions for trees. But one of the trees that can handle that very well happens to be green ash. So, the loss of ash, the eventual loss of ash due to emerald ash borer in these floodplain plant communities, large increase in sunlight. If 1 in 5 trees is a green ash and they're all dead, then that's a tremendous amount of sunlight now reaching the forest floor. And these floodplain communities, you can tell, are very shady, very thick, dense vegetation. So that's going to change things quite a bit. My fear is it'll create brand new habitat for invasive species. I'm not sure what the replacement time, and what I mean by replacement time is what will take the place of green ash in the canopy, and how long will that take for it to return to something like previous conditions, either from seed that are held in the soil with new ash trees after this wave passes or is reduced, or whether to be a complete replacement, sort of like oaks did after the chestnut blight. And something else that I'm wondering about is we'll have, yes, they're standing dead now, but eventually, what goes up comes down. And then what happens when you have all of this debris dropping into a tidally influenced stream? It's not really a non-target. Here's a native species that grows right along the Marcy Oak. There's quite a bit of it. You may have seen it. It's quite lovely. It's called Old Man's Beard, Chionanthus, in the same family. I'd like to ask someone here if that could also be attacked by the beetle, perhaps right at the end of its cycle when it's running out of ash trees to infect, whether this could also be infected. Impacts to wildlife. The Marcy Oak in the Idlewild, in the wildlife management area, it's really extraordinary. Some of the largest migrations of things like blue-black herring come up the Marcy Oak where they spawn. Critical nesting habitat for things like wood ducks, prothonotary warblers. Some of the ponds and the slow sloughs will have rare fish like this little black-banded sunfish. It's about the size of a 50-cent piece. It's really tiny. River otter, long-nosed gar. Again, these are things that sort of keep you up at night. If you have all this debris dropping into the stream, will that alter migration patterns for things like a blueback herring? It's certainly going to alter stream habitat diversity. It could be good or bad. I'm really not sure. It's definitely going to change mating and nesting site availability for really for everything that's there. That's showing. It's going to worried about in the long term, not short term, but the long term. It's just one tidal creek. Multiply that by every tidal creek that's on the eastern shore, and you've got a tremendous amount of woody debris. Again, it's going to drop, it's going to lie there, and it's going to rot, which should, particularly during the flood zones during the spring, it's going to increase the flow of suspended solids, which is going to also increase the nutrient load that comes into the Chesapeake Bay. Now that we're all depressed, I'll thank you for listening.